Perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there's, oh, you got water, but there's some waters there too.
Just one thing real fast. This last week, I went overboard overtime. I was telling stories, and one of the questionnaire persons had to leave, and she had to excuse herself. So I'm going to do the best I can not to go overboard today. But if you have to leave for any time, just feel
Yeah.
free to do it. Okay, so
Maddie has something, so she'll have to leave a little early.
okay,
But yeah,
all right. So I'm good with that.
perfect.
Mhm. Okay, I'm
All right.
ready whenever you
All right,
guys
you ready?
are ready. Yeah.
First of all, I'm Dante. Just wanted to
Dante?
introduce myself.
Okay.
Nice to meet you. Our first question we have is, can you describe why you decided to go to St. Mary's College?
Okay. Now that answer is very, very brief. In my interview last week, I shared that in my last year in high school, my senior year, I had developed into a very, very, very good high school basketball player. I was a well sought after prep with all major universities. Many, I had scholarship offers across the country. And out here in California, UCLA wanted me to come, San Jose State, USF, Cal Berkeley, just to name those big schools were after me. And I even had a scholarship offer to Utah State, where a player who went to my high school with me, McClymonds High School, was a superstar player in his years at McClymonds, and he went to Utah State. So the coaches there were trying to get me to follow him to go out there. And I had asked my father. I said, Daddy, I said, help me with picking these schools. Which one of these schools I should go to. And he said, that's no big deal. Just go where Roy is going. Now, Roy is my older brother. Roy is 1 year older than I am, and he graduated the year before I did. He was in the 12th grade, I was in the 11th grade, and we had a great basketball team. We won our league. We were undefeated in the league, and him and I both were all-city basketball players. So St. Mary's offered him a scholarship, and he attended there, and that was a great part in Odell Johnson, who was the dean of men there, helped guide St. Mary's to a black talent, which was my brother from an all-black high school, McClymonds High School. And my father just made it very simple to me, go to school with Roy. And I never even had a second thought about it. That was my brother. We grew up together. We slept in the same bedroom. We did everything in life together, and that's on the interviews I had last week. So I came to St. Mary's because my brother was here.
All right, next question we have for you is, what was your experience here? What was the campus climate like when you attended the college?
Okay, now I read the questions this morning, and I also saw that the next question, they kind of weave in together, okay? But when I first got here, now here's where the storytelling is got to come in, okay? Because this is going back to August of 1969. And the campus was an all-male campus. St. Mary's was one of the last colleges in the country that were all male still. The following year, that's when women came to the campus. So if I can put your mindsets into being on a small campus like this, and there were no girl students, just all men, okay? So that's what we all came into. The campus was very underdeveloped as far as what you all see right now. There were only two halls of study at that time, which was Dante and Galileo. That was it. That's where all the classes were, and it's very small in population. I don't know what the number of the students were, but it was a small amount of students. And the dormitories were the three dorms, Aquinas, Augustine, and De La Salle. And newer dorms, I don't know when they were put in, was Justin Hall, and Mitty. And that was it as far as dormitories were concerned. And of course, the cafeteria, which people call the common dining area, I heard that, but that was the structure there. It's still the same. I went in there about 2 weeks ago and got a lot of memories of going in there. That was a significant part of being formalized into becoming a college student, was that gathering. And if you all have ever watched those Harry Potter movies, when I saw those movies, it reminded me of the cafeteria, when I went in there. But the campus was all male, and there was a very, very small student body of black and brown students at that time. We might have composed of maybe 5% of the students here at the school. And it was the time of 1969 was, and this is a part of, I think, question number 4, but I'm gonna kind of lean into it a little bit because I have to, because it's a part of the developing of the picture. But this was the time of the Vietnam War. There was a lot of anti-war sentiment. All of us were at the age of being drafted. There was a constant fear amongst all of the guys that your number was going to come up in the draft. So that weighed heavy on how you went through your day, because that was always in the back of your mind. That first year, I qualified not to be drafted, but what they had a status as a student deferment. And I was on a basketball scholarship. I don't know if everybody else had that also. I'm thinking they may have because they were students, but I don't know if mine was because I was an athlete also. I don't know if that was the case. But there was just a collective mindset of camaraderie amongst all students. There were a lot of the guys who were hippies. I don't know if you all are familiar with that social spectrum in the Flower Children in the late 60s and on into the 70s. But a lot of those guys were hippies. They had long hair and were doing their thing. And then there were a lot of us, the black students, we were like Black Panther Party people, and coming in with a lot of our political issues and social issues that we were bringing from our neighborhoods. But we never had any type of anti-one versus the other. We all melded in together. And I remember becoming more absorbed into the hippie culture, but still maintaining my political identity, being a black so-called revolutionary at that time, but getting to meet a lot of the guys who were white guys, getting to be friends with them and sharing stories of different backgrounds, and everybody was just kicking it. It was some very peaceful times on the majority of the times amongst the students. And keeping in mind, we were all male students, no girls. So when you don't have girls around, it's a whole different type of mindset. You're not trying to impress anybody. You're not trying to dress a certain way. Everybody was hanging out, and a lot of us didn't wear socks, walking around, and didn't wear drawers, just hanging loose and being free. And the quad was there, but not like it is now. It was smaller. But boy, that was a gathering place, and everybody would be out there when the weather permitted, throwing frisbees, and it was just those type of happy times. And then, because of the war, a lot of us were just living in a hopeful reality of mind that I wasn't going to have to get drafted, and I hope the war ends So everybody was always kind of aloof at that, knowing that that was in the back of our mind. So that was like the social atmosphere of an all-male campus, and we had a recreation center that was on the first floor of De La Salle, and had a lot of pool tables in there and a piano, and there was a little small, kind of like a little small restaurant, very small, couple of tables in an occupied space, and you could buy hamburgers and pizza and stuff like that in the evenings after dinner was over in the cafeteria. And if you ever had an appetite, you could go down there and hang out there if you wanted to, and in the rec center. And the majority of my life outside of classrooms was the life in the dorms. And that first year in the dorms, oh, what an amazing thing it was. Coming from home for me for the first time and not having to report back to parents in the evening. You can stay up all night and do what you wanted to do. And we played a lot of cards in the room with our friends and listened to music and drank a lot of wine. A lot of red wine, Mountain Dew, I think that was the name of that wine. No, it was Red Mountain wine, and Ripple. Those were the wines we were drinking in the evening, and playing a lot of cards, not dominoes then, but a lot of cards, and listening to good music and jazz, and going over to the cafeteria for breakfast and lunch, and then going back to dinner. You know, we all would meet there. But in the cafeteria, even though there wasn't any animosity, the majority of all the black students, we sat together, and the brown students, not that it was anything against the whites or them against us, but we were all like friends, and we just all bonded together and started discovering where we were. And for me, just coming out of high school and meeting new friends, that's where I met Mushir during that August in 1969. Mushir had came up from Los Angeles, and he had a good friend of his that they really hung out together through junior high and high school, and he was on the campus for 2 years, and then he left and went back to Los Angeles. But that's where I met Mushir, and his friend. His name at that time was Ronnie Wilder. He's Muslim now, like Mushir. And I gravitated towards them. Likewise, they gravitated to me. And we had very, very similar experiences from our age in school, as opposed to my brother, who was a year older. You know, each generation has its own values and mores, you know, as you're moving forward. But Mushir, and his name is Kamel now, the two of them and myself were identical in personality traits, in our experiences of dealing with our peers during high school and how we grew up in an inner city reality. So we gravitated to each other. We were together all the time, like we were the three amigos. And we hung out all the time and developed a very close bond. Mushir and I have kept our bond very intact ever since that first day we met in August of 1969. Kamel, we've stayed in touch with each other, and I just spoke with him on the phone just maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But that bond that we all have, the black guys, we call ourselves the St. Mary's Brothers, or the Brotherhood. It's about 12 of us that we still have, we're on a text thread, and we still communicate with each other that way. So that bonding that took place at St. Mary's, not all in that first year I was here, but guys who came on board the second and the third year during that time. So the campus was very, very mellow at that time. Any political type of frustrations or political groups that were antagonistic towards each other we didn't seem to know about that. If there was anything going on at that time, for me being a freshman, it was just about getting here, living away from home for the very first time in my life. I was lucky my roommate was my brother, who was my brother all my life, and he was a role model for me as far as getting a mindset on being a scholar as opposed to being an athlete. Uh, as I mentioned, I was a famous basketball player, and the person that I was when I came up here was to make it to the NBA. I had hoop dreams. Receiving a college education was secondary to me at that time. I just knew at that time, oh, I'm going to make it to pros because I was very good, and I thought I had a chance. And I let my academic pursuits take second place to really concentrating on perfecting my basketball game. And two classes I got behind in that first year that I had to take two summer school courses in Oakland at Laney Junior College to get those grades back up to where they should be. I had to make those up. I had let that get away. I had not made the appropriate transition at that time of being a scholar. I was an athlete first, but that changed, and that's another question as it moves forward, if I remember the questioning right. Um, the classes, I was a history major when I first started, but I switched my major when I was a junior to being an art major. I was always an artist all my life, and the class. I think that's second question. On how was it like in the classes? But I think I answered the second part to completion. Okay. Is there anything out of that first one that you think
Out of
I
the
may
first
have
question.
left out?
No, the first two are pretty dialed.
Okay.
Okay. I'm Maddie. The third question we have for you is, can you share some positive learning experiences at the college, such as like classes, professors, or events that were formative to your time here at St. Mary's?
Okay. All right. So I'll go socially with that first about the positiveness. As I mentioned earlier, that there were all male campus, and a lot getting to meet a lot of the white students. I came from an all black neighborhood. My high school was all black, a small percentage Latinos. I had never been around whites in that type of overwhelmingly presence every day. And but like I said, most of those guys were hippies, but a lot of them were not, and they were very collegiate and still sticking to, their old conservative ways. Uh, but going into the classrooms, I found myself being like one or two black students in an all-white class. So this was like cultural shock for me that I was in there, and I was very conscious of that I was one, maybe another person or two people in there were in the class with me. Now, in my last week interview, I had mentioned growing up that I had attended a program leaving the ninth grade the summer of 1966. It was called an Upward Bound program, and the University of California at Berkeley was the host of that. And I was selected out of 12 ninth graders who had a high academic GPA and was very socially fit kid, never was getting into trouble. And I was accepted into that program. And in that program for the summer for 8 weeks, we were exposed, and there was a lot of kids, inner city kids like myself, who had great academic potentiality, and then the government was giving grants out to colleges to give us what was known as a head start. Uh, and we took classes on the Cal Berkeley campus. This was when I was going to the 10th grade, going into high school. And there was classes were all high academic pursuing young people. And we were exposed to how college classes were being run. We were challenged. We had a lot of reading. We took an English class and we took a math class. And we were leaving ninth grade, going into 10th grade, and in our school, the highest math you could take in the ninth grade was Algebra 1. Geometry was the next course we were going to take in the 10th grade. And back then, y'all, in junior high school, went to the ninth grade, but that was the first freshman year of high school, but it was held on a different campus. So we were freshmen in the ninth grade and didn't even know it that we were freshmen. We just thought we would go right into high school as sophomores, and that was the first category. That's what we thought. But geometry was that first math course that we all took when we left junior high school. So in Upper Bound, we had a geometry class, and we had our English class where the professors, there was one professor and his assistants who was a senior at Cal, exposed us to more reading, like we read Dante's Inferno. I remember that. That stood out in my mind more than anything. And Cyrano de Bergerac, we read that. Outside of those two, nothing really stuck out profoundly, except for a couple of anthologies of reading that we did that. But I was exposed to what a college experience looked like and being on a college campus. But if you ever been on the UC campus at Berkeley, that's a night and day from St. Mary's. You know, I mean, that's very vast and right there on the street where you come in, go out, and the campus was so large. But St. Mary's, you know, just one way in and one way out. And once you were here, you know, you were into being surrounded by the hills and the grasses out there. And everything was beautiful. It was green. And where the baseball field is, there was a very small, old-fashioned baseball field there. And the rugby field was to the right of that. Everything you see over there as you come in and go to the right, it wasn't anything like that. It was just almost like being out in the country. And that gave an atmosphere of tranquility. And then where the SMC, we call it that, the logo up on the hill, was sometimes people would just walk up there and sit down and look back down on the campus. That was fun to do. But in those classes, with all of that going on outside, it had a great impact of tranquility on being a learner, that you knew outside of that classroom that all that greenery was out there and you were meeting new friends. But the instructors, they were very receptive and open, never showing any signs of biasness or any of that. I never picked up any of that from them. And there was one instructor whose name was Jim Collins. He was my seminar class instructor. And in his class, I can remember two books. Remember, this is 1969, 70, trying to go way back there. But the two books that I remembered was The Stranger by Camus. We read that and the autobiography of Malcolm X. Now, that was a powerful book for me and Mushir. Mushir was in that class with me because we grew up when Malcolm X was being a civil rights leader. You know, he was assassinated in 1965. We were in the 8th grade. But he came on the scene very prolifically in 1963. I was in the 6th and early years of the 7th grade, and I remember watching him on TV on the news. My father used to make Roy and I watch the news every day when we were at home, and I saw Malcolm, and I listened to Malcolm. And Malcolm's delivery was the exact opposite of Dr. King's delivery. Dr. King believed in integration and nonviolent protesting. Malcolm was in the Nation of Islam, black Muslims, and the doctrine was not integration, it was separation. I never remember the word segregation, but separation, that there would be a black state, state of mind, and if anywhere physically, and blacks would buy only from black owned businesses. It was separation. And that was Malcolm's doctrine, and I'm being very brief with that, with the black Muslims. And as a young junior high school kid, I really listened to Malcolm because he was a very fiery orator. And he was speaking to my generation of young kids as where Dr. King was speaking to an older generation combating and breaking down the Jim Crow era and the people who lived before that, just coming out of slavery by just decades, and older people. My age group was a new group that was taking it to another level. And from Malcolm's doctrine outgrow of the Black Panther political party emerged. And I was a guy at that age level right during those times. And to read Malcolm's autobiography in Mr. Collins' class opened my eyes up to who he was and what his history was. So I got a chance to know the man behind the face of being on the news. And that started shaping my political mindset when I read that. This is where I started losing my thrust to become a professional athlete. Just from reading that book, and Mr. Collins exposed me to that in his class. He exposed all of us to that. The other classes were not as, I would say, energized as Mr. Collins. He was younger. I can't even remember the other professors I had. I was a history major. And I barely remember them, but it was just basic, doing your history assignment, reading and writing your papers, on that, and not a strong interaction of who you were, with the instructor. So, but the class life was, it was user-friendly. If you wanted to put something in it, you were going to get a good education out of it. And again, like I say, the dorm life was where we were all the time. Now, I met a lot of people from different backgrounds at this college. And most of, particularly over 98% of the time, the black students were all together. We did not go and visit and keep company with the white students in the dorms. Ever so often that would happen, where there was some, we would say, man, that's a real cool white dude, and go over their room and cut it up with them or invite them over to come over and establish some friendships with a couple of those guys. But for the majority, the black students all hung out together. And I got a chance to meet a lot of, when I say a lot, there's a small amount of us, guys who did not grow up in the inner city like I did. They came from more affluent neighborhoods. Not rich, not at all, but not like the rough toughness of the inner city where Mushir and I, developed. And we met those guys. They were going to Catholic schools in the Bay Area, like St. Joseph, St. Elizabeth, St. Mary's High School. They had a whole different background than we did. The guys who, my brother and I, came from McClymonds High School, and Mushir and Kamal came from Cathedral High School, which was like McClymonds to a certain degree in Los Angeles. And there was some students came from Pittsburgh High School. I think two or three guys came there that had the same similar inner city experience. So that was a wonderful time to get to meet people who had a different background growing up in Oakland like I did. And of course, having the college experience allowed me to be able to see perspectives from other blacks that was different from mine. And then there was the international community on the campus. Um, we met maybe 4 or 5 guys who were from the continent of Africa. I know from Kenya and from Sierra Leone for a fact. And we bonded with them. And we embraced with them and invited them to come over to the dormitory. And they were very appreciative of that they were being accepted by the blacks here in this country coming from Africa. And we bonded with them and let them know that, we had a love for, we said, the motherland, and was curious about them sharing stories about, what it was like for them in Africa. So we bonded with that. Help me out now with that question again, that I'm not missing anything in going into it.
No, that was perfect. The next question we have is, what were some of the most significant challenges or social justice issues that students of color faced at SMC during your time here?
Okay. The challenges wasn't any more for us than us ourselves feeling a part of St. Mary's. We were here, but we were not here. We were not represented here. Everything that we did to establish ourselves as entities on the campus was done by us ourselves. We started developing. This is where the ethnic courses started taking its hold, is that our classes didn't reflect us. They were just basic classes. And like I said, we were in the classrooms being like 2 or 3 out of a whole class. And the nature of the classes was just the basic educational practices that you needed in order to sustain your degree, fulfill your major requirements. And walking around and just looking at the structures, it was definitely Eurocentric or St. Mary's. There wasn't anything that was projecting at that time that represented where we came from. And that was not an overwhelming, overt challenge, but it was one inwardly that we're walking around and there's nothing, like you're not at home anymore, of course, that's representing you, and then you're in the small minority of seeing others that look like you, to be able to get a feel for being a Gale, being at St. Mary's. And, we knew we were SMC students, but as far as being a Gale, we were not feeling that. It just wasn't representing or like it was inclusive of us as being a part of St. Mary's College. That was not so much of a challenge overtly, but it was something that we accepted and had to accept, and we had to naturally, to survive, we had to evolve into making the campus reflect us to a certain degree. This is the beginning of the ethnic class program, was from that mindset and those feelings of we need to be represented or reflected. Not that we're here, we're on the campus, but we are a part of the campus. No move was being made to do that for us by any outside entities. It was something that just developed within ourselves. Okay, keep me on the track with the questions that, if I'm handling it and keeping it going.
Yes, it was perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
5.
Do you do the 5 and 6 and I'll do 7 since my phone's
Sure.
recording over there?
I'm doing
You're doing 5 and
5.
6.
Okay. When you were here, it was a time of great social unrest. Did you witness any forms of student protests, campus debates, or college-wide responses to the politics of the time period?
There never was any formal protests, like saying, like back at that time on the street, it was carrying signs all the time and sit-ins and marches. That didn't happen. So keep in mind, it's a very small campus. Any student gathering was done out in the quad where you came together. And there were times where there would be maybe 3 times in the freshman year that there were gatherings and people were speaking against the war. And I remember a word I had never heard before, that the gathering was called, we having a Vietnam War moratorium. And people came out, this was all men came out and sat around, and some of the student speakers got up and talked about the president, was Johnson at the time, or Nixon, I can't remember, about, going on with this war. And it gave us a chance to bond together and share in our fears that we would eventually get drafted and go get killed in Vietnam. So that may have happened a couple of times. I think maybe once a Black Panther spokesperson, it might have been Bobby Seale, came out to the campus and spoke about the Black Panther Party agenda. But again, I say it's so far back. I do remember there was a person came up, I can't remember exactly, which one of those Black Panthers that it was. So as far as political gatherings, to a very minimum. Okay, help me out with the other part outside of the political gatherings and so forth. Refresh me on that part.
Student protests, campus debates, or college-wide responses?
Okay, that's what I just spoke to, that there was really never any debates.
Okay.
We all were on the same page. We were all young men and we were scared to death of Vietnam, but we were very aware of the civil rights movement and the women's movement. But the civil rights were affecting us, the students of color, not so much the white students that didn't really come down on them, but there were many of them, I say, were empathetic with that. They had empathy for us on that, I should say, and sympathized with that also. And we spoke about that at times where they would give their support.
Okay. So next week, Group A will spend their time with you asking about your activism and the basketball walkout.
Okay.
Do you mind sharing a bit about that experience with us? Specifically, can you describe the conditions at St. Mary's College that led to the walkout?
Okay. All right. So when I was a sophomore, okay, I'm going to just move it on in up to the walkout, step by step as far as my memory allows us. We had a boycott when I was a sophomore. The one where we did the walkout was when I was a junior. But the one when I was a sophomore is unrecognized. It was just like no one knows about it except those of us who were here. There were 2 African-American freshman players on the team, and they were just walk-ons on the team. They didn't have scholarships, and they were the 2 best players on the team. There were other guys on the team, and remember, this is majority white school. It might have been 3 or 4 black players on that freshman team. And the 2 best players were in the starting 5. They did not have scholarships. One of those great players attended St. Mary's High School, and he was a very famous high school player coming out of Berkeley. And the other guy was from Seaside, California. This guy was so great at one time he scored like 86 points in a game. I mean, he was that good. They were fantastic players. But the other guys on the team that had scholarships, they could not compare to these guys nowhere could compete with them. But they had scholarships. So the black players on the team at that time and the black students, we had a black student union. I'm glad this came up because I might have forgotten that part of that first year. We had a black student union on the campus. And the president of the Black Student Union was a gentleman from from Pittsburgh High School, and Reggie LeMay, who is a doctor now. He got his doctorate degree, and he'd been a professor. But he graduated from high school in '68, and he was the BSU president. And we would have BSU meetings in Dante Hall in the evening after dinner, maybe twice a week. And we discussed about Maurice Harper and Nate Carroll not having scholarships. And we organized and addressed that to the athletic department. Don McKillop was the dean of athletics. I can't remember his exact title. But we gained an audience with him and discussed it with him and the coaches that those two guys should get scholarships. They're the best. Why aren't they having receiving a scholarship? And they refused to do it. They were not okaying it. So the players on the team, the black guys on the team, my brother and a guy from New Orleans and another guy from McClimb, his name's Sam Hill, and he was our leading scorer that year. We all boycotted the game just by not playing that game. If they did not make that move to give those guys the scholarships, and Mushir and Kamal went out on the basketball floor at halftime to bring that up to the attendees at the game. Now, we used to play our games in that old gym at the other end of the school. Are you all familiar with that old gym over there? Okay. That's where St. Mary's played its games. It was like a cracker box compared to all these arenas these other colleges had in our division. But that's where St. Mary's had always played. It was like a high school gym. And if you haven't been there, I mean, you can get in there if you walk down the causeway of, where the cafeteria is. And now there's new structures there, but you could walk all the way across, and it would be at the very, very end. You can't go any farther. That was the old gym. Like coming from the new arena, if you come down that path that way, you'll go right in front of it. And I remember doing that walk many times going to practice. And we had a post office that was over there on the way. St. Mary's had its own zip code, and it had its own distinction as St. Mary's College of California. And our post office was over there, and that was fun to go over there to that little small post office. But Kamal and Mushir walked out in halftime and shared, to the students that Maurice Harper and Nate Carroll deserved scholarships for their abilities, and just as well as the other players who had scholarships that couldn't compare to them. And the dean, the athletic dean, they surrendered to that and okayed it. And Maurice Harper and Nate Carroll got their scholarship. So that was a result of political activism by the black students in the very beginning. That was the first time that happened. Now, leading into the walkout, okay, this is a long story. So what's our time looking at right now?
2:40.
Okay, so we're here from 2 to 4. I could weave in as much of it as possible. All right, so in that year, that's when I was a junior. That year, was when the ethnic study courses started surfacing. And is that the ethnic studies portion? That's for another time, isn't it? To go into that in depth. That's another question, date or interview. Okay, so I'll stay focused mainly not on that, but how that helped generate the mindset for us to do what we did. Now, I brought a book here today. I brought it to sit on my lap so I wouldn't forget it. This is a book that one of the ethnic study courses, I think the name of it was called Domination and Submission. And the professor was a guy named Karegi Hekamara. And he was a gentleman who was writing his dissertation. He smoked a pipe. He had a bald head. And if you ever seen any pictures of Isaac Hayes is the person who wrote the score to Shaft, which was a big movie in 1968. But you can look Isaac Hayes up on Google, and Hekamara looks like Isaac Hayes, if you want to get a view of him. And he wore African dashikis, and he smoked a pipe, and he wore sandals. Never wore shoes. He always wore sandals. And he was a very articulate, well-spoken professor. He had a powerful delivery in his speech. And this is the book that he introduced us to, called Report from Iron Mountain. And if you all want to get his title, you can, author and all that, you can get it if you're interested in it before we leave. But this book talked about how in this country there are clandestine operations that go on, and the country is being ran by a power elite. Now, there was a book in the 40s or the 30s called The Power Elite. I don't know if the author's name was Mill, but this is very similar to that. And it talked about specifically what were the dynamics of this country going to be like when the Vietnam War ended. Because this book definitely made it clear that the Vietnam War was a profiteering war, that all of the contracts, military contracts for helicopters and tanks, that those people who were running those factories, those establishments, if that's a better word, allows for a better word of it, they were raking in the dough. And the people who have the mindset like this author was making that clear. This was not a political war. It was a war of profits. And as long as that war was continuing, those military suppliers were just reeking in dough. President Johnson even was said that he had a contract with one of those helicopter manufacturers, and he wasn't giving up that war. They were making money. So, and it was killing a lot of people. Guys were just getting killed, and it was like lowering the population of men. And that war in itself, and this is all leading into a mindset of the walkout, because here we were reading this, the guys who participated in the walkout, and the student atmosphere, and a lot of people were not in this class, but those of us, the black guys who walked out of the game, we took this class. And the Hekamara, was giving us insight on who we were in an exploitative environment in the United States of America. We were all being used, not just blacks, but everybody was being used by corporations. And we know of that up to this day. But that was not as profound back then. It was all about we're going to fight for our country. Our country meant everything. It was die for the country. But with that war, it was a whole different picture. It wasn't justified. Why in the world were we there in the first place? And then we were getting enlightened on it was all about money making, and lives was not important. So we grew out of that being very, very politically conscious. And like for me, that was a turning point of seeing myself as an NBA player. Once my eyes were opened up to the realities of this country, going along with the still racism that existed in the country, but not seeing myself anymore as I'm just going to go along and score points and get rebounds and have people cheering for me and make money as an athlete. My mind shifted, and I started, that's why I changed my major from history, and I started taking a lot of, I took political science, 2 semesters of that, and social sciences, 2 semesters of that. And then I had always been an artist all my life, and I switched from history, and I started reflecting on myself and started studying fine arts. And I switched my major to fine arts. And I graduated with a fine arts degree and a political science minor and a social science minor. So this was the developing of my mindset. And the other guys were doing the same thing. I can't speak for them personally, but we were all aware of becoming aware of ourselves as being politically minded people, and not so much as being athletes like we were superstars in high school, but we were very conscious of what was our futures going to be like. What if we did not become professionals? What were we going to try to do with our lives? What type of people were we going to go out into the world at large, into the communities which we would go into? What kind of knowledge were we going to take back and give back to our communities? Because we all agreed upon, not directly but indirectly, that we were definitely going to pursue giving back to the communities in whatever capacity on wherever we were hired. So we were highly motivated on understanding political injustices. The big injustice that hit us, and this is what led to the basketball boycott. The dean of men at that time was Odell Johnson. Odell Johnson had been the dean of men. I don't know, can't remember when he started. It was before I arrived here. But he was black, and he was from Fresno, and he graduated from St. Mary's, I think, in 1956. Odell Johnson now, from the last I heard, maybe 2 years ago, Odell Johnson is the St. Mary's highest scoring basketball player. He has that record. And he was inducted into a Hall of Fame status here at the campus, and another institution inducted him into a Hall of Fame outside of that. I can't remember what that was. But he was a very profound activist person of bringing black students to the campus. He was like a recruiter. And like I said, he recruited my brother to come here. And he was a very open, liberal type of gentleman with student affairs. A lot of the white students loved him. Odell Johnson was like the students' dean. He was not into really enforcing a strong disciplinary inactive on anyone. He gave the students a lot of freedom, to express themselves, and if anybody wanted to vocalize against anything, that he encouraged that to happen. If you wanted to make any type of statements about something that you may thought that wasn't appropriate, and he would carry that. He would carry that for us and address it with the administrative levels over him, like the president at that time, who was Brother Mel Anderson. Now, Brother Mel had hired another black gentleman whose name was Laniel Henderson, specifically to help Brother Mel with getting to understand the black student's psychology and what we were bringing, as he had no idea. But Laniel was a younger black guy, and he played basketball over at that gym with us. He was relatively young. And he would talk to us in our rooms. He would come visit the room and get an idea of how we were feeling about being here on the campus and not having a black presence or representation. And Laniel Henderson would take those ideas and thoughts back to Brother Mel. So those sharings eventually ended up with the administration hiring black professors to teach ethnic courses. All of this was not done directly by sitting down with a panel or anything, but Laniel Henderson was like the go-between messenger for the mindset of the black students to Brother Mel. And Brother Mel was open to that, and he hired black professors to come and teach the ethnic courses that we had on campus at that time. This was one of them with Karegi Hekamara, and we had, of course, African history taught by an African from Kenya. His name was Professor Nyaga, and we had two black literature courses, two separate ones, one introductory and the other one was beyond that. And we got a chance to get exposed to current and past black writers at that time that we did not know about because we were not being exposed to them. We knew of the Harlem Renaissance and Langston Hughes, but not anything beyond that. But there were current and contemporary black authors like Ralph Ellison, and especially one who was here in the Bay Area, and his name is floating away from the OG's mind right now, but Ishmael Reed, that was his name. And we were exposed to their writings, which also gave us a more sense of pride that, you know, we are being represented out there with our cultures currently. And we wanted to be a part of that. We wanted to grow into that and be able to carry that message and send that message also. So we were being refined by the two instructors that were presenting us to that, and we had a black psychology class. And the professor name was Art Orton. And he gave us purposefulness of how the black psyche has to develop in a racist country that subdues your personal and mental health by its systematic racism from slavery onto where we were at that time, which still exists. And it gave us the ability to rationalize ourselves beyond how we grew up watching TV and movies where blacks were not represented in any positive form or fashion. You were only on the big screen, you were a servant in a servant position, or you were a gangster or a hoodlum. And one of the things that, as we continue to learn, not to get away from the psychology part, was that, Art Orton, Professor Orton, guided us through how our minds had been shaped, and that we were not representative in mass media production. So we developed a mindset that was not one that we needed to carry on with our own self-respect of who we were as an ethnic group. So that psychology he developed in us. So these courses and giving us a mindset started taking us from being young men growing up as athletes or hanging out, in the inner city or wherever you were, and not having the knowledge on where you were from in order to understand where you are in the presence to determine where you're going to be later. So those courses developed us. Odell Johnson, highly respected dean, who Brother Mel Anderson did not approve of Odell Johnson's policies with the students. I never knew, I don't think any of us knew, the exact details behind it all, but Brother Mel fired Odell Johnson. Odell Johnson was beloved by the guys, the white community, and the other communities here on the most part. The conservative community that was here, of course, they didn't approve of Odell Johnson's liberalism, as it was leaning away from the old staunch ways of St. Mary's in the 30s and the 40s and up into the 50s, up until the presence of students of color were arriving on the campus. And then again, like I say, the hippie-minded liberal students who were on the campus, war protesting mentalities of those white students and others on the campus. So with Odell's dismissal, it was a firing, and it was not done by protocol. And there was a group of white students, and they were called the Odell Johnson Defense Committee. I don't know who in that group was legally talented, but they knew that this was an illegal firing. So there was a protesting organization by them. And now this is where we had gatherings out in the quad on that. This is where the issue, and keeping in mind, this is now, I'm a junior, past being coming up as a freshman and a sophomore. Now we're going into development for all of us young men of becoming political activists, because we were becoming aware of what was going on and paying attention to it. So the Odell Johnson Defense Committee, they organized, I don't know where they were meeting. I never went to one of their meetings, but they reached out to the athletes, and it was basketball season at that time. Who they spoke directly to, I never knew that. It was up on kind of like a hierarchy of who was talking to who. And we had a guy on our team who had just came back from Vietnam that year. He was a lieutenant in Nam. But he graduated from high school in 1965 from Berkeley High. He was older than us, just graduating in 68 and 69. And he had leadership skills from his war experience and being older. And he was more of a representative of communication with the Odell Johnson Defense Committee and athletes. And the discussions that they were having was being shared with us through Al Strange, the athletes, that is. And our sentiments went across all of the players on the team, not just the 5 guys who walked out of the game and protested the game, but the whole team, the whole campus, evolving around the Odell Johnson Defense Committee and the people who were sensitive to that. And the Chicano students had an organization that was called MECHA, MECHA. I can't remember what those distinct letters represented, but they had a strong established community of activism within MECHA. Okay, now, on the way to that gym I was telling you about, off behind the post office, there was a small building. It was called the jail, spelled G-A-O-L, not like G-A-I-L. And that was like a small, it wasn't that small, but it was small. And it had a lot of space for gatherings because we had dances there, if you can imagine that. And we had one pool table there that was rescued from when they remodeled the 3 dorms over there. When they got remodeled, they gutted everything out. In that pool room, recreation room, one of our, and I'll get to these 2 gentlemen in a minute, one of the assistant deans were able to get that pool table over to the jail. Now the jail housed the offices of 2 positions that were created from the ethnic studies movement, where we had 2 assistant deans for ethnic students, one representing black and brown students, who was Tom Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with his name. And the other for the Latino students was a gentleman named Harry Acosta. And they were in close communication, as far as I know, which they had to be, dealing with administration levels at the higher ups on sharing the needs of the ethnic students. They moved out into recruitment in ethnic neighborhoods to get students to come to St. Mary's, and they were counselors. And they had 2 separate offices, side by side, separated by a wall, in the jail. Now, with those 2 being housed in the jail, black and brown students gathered in the jail. We came together as one. The black and brown students, we all got a chance to know each other. We were very friendly with each other, and we saw that we had common issues with racism in the country. We gave dances there, and those were great dances. If you could just imagine college students, and a lot of women were on campus by that time. We had big parties in there, and a couple of records would be the R&B music, and then a couple of records would be music from the Chicano community, like Santana and Malo, and we were all dancing together, and it was a wonderful bond that we had together. And the Chicano students rallied behind, Mecha rallied behind Odell Johnson also in this growing movement of making it aware that we did not agree as a student body with the firing of Odell Johnson. Brother Mel himself, and I don't think anyone else knows this but Mushir and myself, but Mushir and I come to our reunions, every 5-year reunions up to the campus. We never miss those. And I think not last reunion, but the reunion before that, Odell Johnson was there. He came up to that reunion, and Brother Mel was there. And of course, we talked with Odell Johnson, and Odell shared with us that Brother Mel came to him and apologized to him that he fired him. And he was crying. when he apologized that, because he knew he was wrong. But there were pressures on Brother Mel, and Brother Mel wrote a book about those times. Now, Mushir knows a great deal more about this than I do. And I'm sure when he gives his part on this, he's going to bring that out very much more than me on what I'm sharing with you right now. But the firing was unjustified and illegal. But over Brother Mel, he was being pressured that Odell Johnson was being too slack and not holding up the conservative values of the school. And he let Odell Johnson go. So the Odell Johnson Defense Committee, in coordination with Al Strange and the basketball players, came to a conclusion that we wanted to get this message out to the public. Because this was little small St. Mary's College. No one knew what was going on up here. So the way to take it to the public was decided that we would boycott the game versus Santa Clara in Santa Clara. And I was injured at the time. I wasn't playing. I was out with extensive knee injuries, which still plague me to this day. But my brother and Nate Carroll, Maurice Harper, and Al Strange were all suited up. They were continuing to play. So we had to come up with how we were going to boycott the game and what was going to be said at the game. And Al Strange, with his great articulate young man, was a profound writer. He wrote the speech for the delivery at the halftime where my brother, Nate Carroll, my brothers Roy Brown, I'm saying their names, Nate Carroll, Al Strange, the speechwriter, and Maurice Harper, did not walk to the locker room. They stayed out on the court. Now, all of the other basketball players had agreed that they were going to boycott. All of them did. And when the time came to do it, they didn't do it. They said, no, I'm not going through with this. The consequences of that were highly severe. Everybody knew that. But prior to that, they all said that they were going to not go back out and play. I don't know if any of those guys were in the Odell Johnson Defense Committee, but they were all white players, except there were two other black players who did not boycott with us. And they had their reasons, which we did not blame them for why they didn't do it. Nobody put pressure on them or ostracized them because of their blackness and not doing it. We did not do that because everybody has a right to do what they feel was right. So we had a meeting, and when I say we, it was all the basketball players met in my dorm room, Roy and I's dorm room, and many members of the Odell Johnson Defense Committee. And our room was in Justin Hall on the first floor, like halfway down the hallway. So we had this meeting, and this meeting was shut out to anybody who was not on the Odell Johnson Defense Committee or on the basketball team. And this is where Al Strange read his speech to everybody on what was to be said. And I remember the title of the speech, that racism is running rampant on St. Mary's College. If that wasn't the title of the speech, it was the very first words in the speech, because I was the person who read the speech. Okay? So the agreement was not going back into the locker room until the speech was read, and then not to come back out after halftime to finish the game. The four guys who were dressed up that I mentioned, they did not come back out to finish the game. But the rest of the team did. The game finished. Now, what a lot is not said is this part, and I have thought of it very often and have mentioned it to Mushir. We've talked that the dynamics of the speech itself and the speech being read, that's never even talked about. So with this opportunity of being interviewed, this could be a first for everybody. I was the reader of that speech. How I became the reader of that speech was as follows. When Al Strange finished reading that speech in that room, and everybody was so impressed, it was highly impressive and articulate. When he finished, he said, okay, now all we need is somebody to read the speech. We all thought he was going to read the speech, but he didn't. And I just found out from him maybe just 4 weeks ago in a text thread with Tom Brown and Maurice Harper and Nate Carroll, because I brought it up. It was the first time I brought it up to him in that text thread. Well, why didn't you read the speech? And he said that we thought that a person who was not dressed up for the game would read the speech. I never heard that until then. That was not mentioned in that meeting, that was the course of direction. But that room was dead silent, y'all. This was major. The interruption of a conference basketball game. This is criminal. Interruption of a public event. That's a crime. Reading that speech was going to be a direct hit on whoever read that speech. And I'll get into that because that was me. And the direct hit came on me afterward. The room, no one volunteered because everybody in that room knew if you do that, you're going to be singled out. This is not a team walking out. This is one man saying what has to be said. No one volunteered. That room was silent, y'all, for almost over 90 seconds. And where I was sitting, I was just, in my mind, contemplating. I said, okay, now's the time to see, is there anybody from the Odell Johnson committee going to come forward? Because they were like the ones, from what I remember, initiated this. And like I said earlier, reached out to the athletes. I was just sure one of them was going to take that position. No one did. And the intensity in there was very deep. And I said to myself, I said, man, these dudes are all playing with this. It's like we can talk this and act like we're revolutionaries. But to go to the battlefield with it, no one is doing it. I said, this is all going to become just a bunch of talk on the campus. But now when the war has to hit the battlefield, the soldiers are not coming forward. The guys walking off the court got betrayed by all the other players who said they were going to do it. They were singled out. Myself, I volunteered because I had become, y'all, and I'm holding this book up, I had become, at that time in my life, a revolutionary. And I knew at that time that my opportunity to become a professional basketball player was going to end. The coach of the team at that time was a gentleman named Bruce Hale. Bruce Hale is the father-in-law of one of the greatest players for the Warriors in their history named Rick Barry. And Bruce Hale was a coach in Miami in college. He was a very productive winning coach. And he also coached one of the first ABA teams, the Oakland Oaks. And he left there and he came to coach St. Mary's. Bruce Hale was a graduate of Santa Clara University. And Bruce Hale was always encouraging me as a basketball player. I remember one time that he told me, he said, Herm, he says, you really know how to play this game. And I had drove up to practice one day. I need to say this to get to the speech because it has to deal with Bruce Hale and me. And I was driving a friend of mine's car up there. He had an old 1956 Chevy. And this was in 1971 at that time. And I had parked outside the gym to go into practice, and Bruce Hale was out there. And he looked at the car and he says, Herm, you know, keep doing what you're doing. And one day you're going to be wealthy, and you won't have to be driving in a car like that. He was really pushing me. And he told me I knew how to play that game. And at St. Mary's, I was the center of the team. I was only 6'7". The other teams in the WCAC at that time, I was playing against guys who were 6'10", 6'11", or 7'1", but we never recruited a big man. And I was recruited as a forward, but I had to transfer over to play center. But I had learned how to play defense in high school from my basketball coach, Ben Tapscott. And this is where Bruce Hale said, Herm, you really know how to play this game. I had a shot. He was going to push it for me to get into the NBA. And I knew this. But I said to myself, that person, Herman Brown, I'm no longer that person. I'm a revolutionary. And my story is like the book that some gentleman wrote called Malcolm X, The Evolution of a Revolutionary. I had come from being a kid, happy-go-lucky kid with my eyes on hoop dreams into becoming the person who would read a speech in front of an entire arena of students who were overwhelmingly white. Santa Clara University. There I was. No one knows that story. How did I get there? What was the dynamics of that? The ball players, they all came to the game on the bus or however they arrived. They knew what they were going to do. I had a job separate from them. This is the story that's never been told. Mushir and another friend of ours who came from the same vicinity growing up experiences as Mushir was named Leon Collins. These two and myself, we met in my dorm on the day of the game. There was no plan for this. There was no plan on how I was supposed to get to the game. There was no plan on was there going to be provided any protection for me going out on the basketball court and leaving the arena. This was all done on the spur of the moment between Leon Collins, Mushir, and myself. I had a car. I had a 62 Chevy. And we just said we were going to drive down there. I can't remember how I got a hold of the bullhorn that I used. But we all arrived at the game right before halftime. We paid our way in, or they were letting people in free at halftime before the game. I can't remember. But I remember walking up towards where the scoring table is. That's like half court. And uh, the game was just ending. The players had not left to go into the locker room because the four guys were going to stay out on the court. And as I was moving out towards the center of the court to read the speech, Bruce Hale looked at me with a very sad and anguished face. And he said, "Herm, don't do this to yourself. Herm, you're going to ruin yourself. Herm, don't do this." And I said to him, I said, "Coach, this is nothing against you, but this is something that has to be done. This is something that I have to do." That was the end of any possible chance for me to fulfill my young boyhood dream of leaving high school and becoming an NBA player. I changed my life to becoming a political advocate from that day on out in projecting my message. What I had learned and developed and became highly culturalized with the ethnic study courses developed me into the man that I was at that time and still am. And I don't know if in our questioning here on what did I do or what we did after St. Mary's or how did ethnic studies mold us into that. But this is the beginning of it for me. But naturally, I was being booed, horrendously booed. The N-word came up many times. Mouchier was standing on my right, and Leon Collins was standing on my left as bodyguards. And I was doing the reading amidst all of that booing and razzing me. And after the speech was over, we walked out. Maurice and Roy and Nate and Al, I don't remember if they stayed out on the floor or went into the locker room because I wasn't looking. My main objective was to get out of that arena with all of that going on against me and Mouchier and Leon. People were throwing stuff at us on the way out. But we managed to get out to the parking lot and got in the car and drove like hell coming back to St. Mary's. The word hadn't gotten out yet because there was no internet at that time, but we made it and got back to school safely. The conversations that we had with each other that night when we were there, I can't remember what they were about, but we just knew we did what we said we were going to do, and we got that job done. That boycott was in effect because of two components. The reading of the speech, which was the most vital, because without that, they would not have walked off. They would have not had no reason to. There was no justification for it. And then them actually not coming back out to finish the game. Nonetheless, we were all suspended from playing on the team for the rest of that year. My brother and Al Strange were seniors that ended their rest of their year of playing basketball. It was all over for them. Nate and Maurice were sophomores. They still had years to continue to play basketball for St. Mary's. I had another year that I could play, but we were suspended from the team. And that I'll get into that. I think that's still on this question. I know this was leading up to the boycott, but on that same vein of the speech being read is that I was visited on the weekend by the FBI. And if you've ever seen the movie Men in Black, it's real. The FBI came on the campus, knocked on my door, my dorm room door. Mouchier and I were in there, just chit-chatting, and I opened the door, and there these guys were. This was way before the movie Men in Black. This is way before that. This is like 1972, I think that was the year. And they were very cool. They were not threatening. They were cool. And they let me know. They said, look, because of what you did, you are now on most dangerous persons list in the country. And the guy said it very calmly. He said, well, we just want to let you know, that we're not going to arrest you or anything, but we're here to warn you that if you ever do anything publicly speaking and stopping a public event, you're going to be arrested with a federal crime. And the guy was cool though, and he said, so I know you're very young and probably didn't realize the intensity of it. He said, but just don't let that happen to yourself again. And I said, okay, and thank you. And they left. And Mushir and I we looked at each other and, just let out some air, and said that was very, very deep. Again, no one else was visited by the FBI because I read the speech. The newspaper, San Francisco Chronicle, had an article and had my picture in it and commented on the event. And the title of the article, it was a very small article, says, Angry Gale sounds off protests at Santa Clara game. As if I organized the boycott, because that's what could be taken into place, because I read it, that I was the only one, that was the impression in that article, that I had become a political person like Herman Brown, Malcolm X, other people who took it and gave the message. But in essence, all of this was collaboration between students at St. Mary's, not just one person, but it all came at me. I remember the days following for a lot of students who really didn't know what was going on and didn't know the inside of it. I was persona non grata on this campus, and people shunned me and wouldn't speak to me except the few people who were friends of mine, and I had to deal with that, for the rest of the school year. And I'm sure the four guys who I mentioned, they all went through that, also. But then there was all those people who supported us, so we had two sides of that. But I'm pretty sure that answers the question. Those are the events that led up to the boycott, the actual boycott itself, and immediately after the boycott, with the FBI coming to give me a warning.
Yeah, that was perfect and super
Thank
thorough.
you.
Can I read the last question off of your phone?
Yes.
Thank you. You're all good. Okay. So for the last question we've shared with you previously, it's how do you think St. Mary's should recognize the black contributors to our school's history? Do you think they've recognized them enough or well enough?
Well, first of all, from what I know, they have not. Now, as I move forward with this, I'm going to give strong reference to a woman who was one of the co-founders of St. Mary's, named Mary Pleasant. Mushir is going to talk about that in great depth. I will be around that, the parameter of that. But to answer the questions, the jail, which was a community gathering at that time, there was a lot of artwork in that building by a very profound student from Pittsburgh, California, named Matt Stelly. When they tore the jail down, Brother Mel did something in his capacity to honor the paintings that was in there by Matt Stelly and one of the Chicano artists named Mario Salazar. May he rest in peace. I don't know if Matt Stelly is still with us or not, but I do know that Mario Salazar, who was a freshman with me passed a couple of years ago. But when Mushir and I visited the Cultural Center on coming up to those reunions, and it was the first time I had gone in the Cultural Center since graduating. This could have been 20 years ago or 15 years ago. Somehow Matt Stelly's artwork was preserved. And if you go over there, you will see his work. You'll know it's his because it has a black reference as its striving force into it. I don't know if he signed his name to his work or not, but I think the person who was in charge of it that day, she didn't even know who painted it. So I don't know if he had his initials down there or not. But I enlightened her, and Mushir, we enlightened her to who the artist was. That is almost like the only representative type of projection for blackness of students that was here that exist. Now, beyond that, like Tom Brown, who was an assistant dean, he's very well recognized. As a matter of fact, they honored him a couple of weeks ago with a presentation that he met and talked to people. But from my knowledge, I don't know that there's any thrust of bringing forth to the awareness on the campus of the black contributions that were made on this campus. A lot of people don't even know about that boycott. And that boycott, it changed the direction in the philosophy of the curriculum of inclusion, that it made an awareness come to the administrative level that no, we are not having fairness with our ethnic students in these classrooms. So the ethnic studies program grew from that, but the recognition of where that came from, it hasn't been projected out to the student body, as far as I know, to any degree. And only students like yourselves, if you're not aware of any of that, then it's not being projected and you're not seeing it. Now, Mary Pleasant is like totally being overlooked. Mary Pleasant was an abolitionist in Civil War times, and she was one of the first black female millionaires, and she was residing in San Francisco. And when this college was getting started, and it started in San Francisco, I don't know if you all know the history of it, but Mary Pleasant donated millions of dollars, I don't know the exact amount, but Mushir does, to get St. Mary started. And she's never been recognized. She's never been honored. We didn't know about Mary Pleasant. None of us. Mushir stumbled across.
It can take longer than 20 minutes, but it is recording now.
Okay.
So you're good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So sorry about that.
No, that happens, you know. I'm cool with it. Okay, so we were talking about Mary Pleasant.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and again, Mushir is going to be the point man on that. He has dug in deep with research on Mary Pleasant, and I am going to just surrender that portion of who this woman was for St. Mary's College and not being recognized. There had been some mention, and he's going to get into it, about naming the Multicultural Center after her, but, you know, we were like, no, it's got to be something way more profound than that. Because everyone who attends this college, you know, we know of, and it's out there, of other contributors that were white. But this is a black woman. And for every black student that comes to St. Mary's, what would they feel like knowing, you know, that's me? There's something here that represents me. I'm seeing myself. If there was a bust of her or a statue of her. But that is something that that students of color could, not just blacks, but students of colors can say, okay, I am a part of St. Mary's. Like what I mentioned earlier in my interview today, we were not a part of St. Mary's. We were here. But with something like that, oh, I have someone like me who helped get the school to be what it is. So I will leave that to Mashir. But for the others, the other part of the question outside of Mary Pleasant, I don't know. I can't answer that. Not being here on the campus, what's out there? Is there any literature out there? Is there any expose to contributors anywhere that students are made aware of? That I do not know.
Okay. I don't think there's anything I'm aware of either. And so I think that was all of our submitted questions, but since we got a little bit of time left, is there any story or detail or memory about your experience here that you want to share that just hasn't come up in the questions so far?
I'll elaborate on me, Herman Brown, leaving high school, wanting to be an NBA player, not taking academics seriously. I knew how to pass a class. I knew how to turn in work if I wanted to. I could compete with anybody. I was in the Upward Bound program at Cal Berkeley. I was a scholar. I knew how to do that. But that wasn't on my mind then, 17 years old. I saw a highway into glory and fame like I had as a high school player. But over those first and second years, being a freshman and a sophomore, and taking ethnic study courses, and what I had known already, living in West Oakland, where the Black Panther Party originated, seeing the Black Panther Party in full force on the streets, and the time of black unity and black solidarity across the country was strong. People identified with each other, and my brother, my man, my sister, that was our language. People were wearing afros at the dashikis and black leather jackets. We had a sense of pride of being Afrocentric. And on television, there was a great entertainment venue called Soul Train in the early 70s, where it was the black version of American Bandstand. And you would see all of the younger people dancing, doing their rhythms and the clothes that was being worn then. I remember platforms and bell bottoms and afros. All of that was going on with having good times, and then the political aspect of it, being conscious all the time of your blackness. And I evolved into that from being an athlete in my junior year. And I continued to pursue political science courses and the social science courses, and had minors in that. And being a very conscious of Afrocentric human being that was on the campus, and I developed a mission. I decided after the boycott, I said, I'm going to graduate and I am going to become a teacher. And I'm going to take what I've learned, this message, back to Oakland, where I came from, and I'm going to teach. My desire in the beginning of teaching was to teach political science courses. I was qualified for that because I had the minor in political science. And St. Mary's, for me, and this is the story, I'm glad we have this time, because this is a part that's, I would think, would bring closure to the after the facts of the boycott. I was suspended, of course, along with Maurice and Nate. So my true senior year, I was suspended. I couldn't play. But I strategized with the coach, the new coach, on being able to come back and play the following year. So I let 2 courses go by that I wouldn't graduate because I was getting my scholarship back, and I could take those 2 classes the following year, and that would give me eligibility to still play. And I still wanted to play. I knew I wasn't going to the pros, but I still wanted to play basketball with my friends because I enjoyed playing basketball. Okay, so that year ended, and my official graduation year was not 73, but 74. Mushir graduated in 73 because that was our year when we came in as freshmen. But I graduated the following year in 74. And I got my fine arts degree and my minor in political science and social science. I was out. I was gone. But the dean of men who took Odell Johnson's place was a gentleman whose name was Dean McLeod. Dean McLeod recognized the sacrifice that I had made. And it was another Christian brother whose name was Brother James Ash. He recognized it. And Brother Ash was the brother who was over Mitty Hall on the 2nd floor. He was a real cool Christian brother. He was always drinking wine, but he was cool, you know. And he loved listening to Ella Fitzgerald. He was a jazz man. The 2 of them got together and they rescued my future. Dean McLeod and Brother Ash set up where I could have free room and board if I came back to school post-graduating. I was going to be which I was, I can't remember what you call the person over the dorm now, but I had the 1st floor of Justin Hall. And I had the pass to eat there. So the next thing was I was going to enter into the education program at St. Mary's to get a teacher's credential. But it was, how was I going to finance that? St. Mary's is extremely expensive. My parents couldn't afford that, and my scholarship was gone. Dean McLeod addressed me to have a meeting with the Christian brother who was over financing tuition. He was an Italian guy, very cool guy. I can't think of his name to save my life. But in one of the last reunions we had up here, and it was called the Golden Gale Session, Dean McLeod attended that, and I got a chance to see him again, I guess after maybe 30 years. And in that gathering, small gathering of surviving guys who were from my time, it might have been about 25 or 26 people that could come. But Dean McLeod was there. And the question came up for people to share memories at St. Mary's. And this story I'm telling you all now is what I shared in that group. And I mentioned Dean McLeod, not knowing he was in there. And he didn't look nothing like he did, you know, back in the day, because we all changed. But he had a beard now, and his hair was thinning out. Not that James Bond-looking guy, you know, back in the day. And I acknowledged him. And the other staff members who were there and the other students were there, they clapped strongly for him and told him, "Stand up, Dean. stand up and then take an acknowledgement. So I got a chance to go over and hug him, you know, before that was over with. But Dean McLeod shouted out when I was mentioning the Italian brother, what his name was, he remembered. But this Christian brother who was over finances, whatever that department was, with tuition, he waived it. He said, don't worry about it, Herman. He said, you got it. So when I went to registrar for my classes, I had signed up for my classes, and the registrar had to have some kind of notice statement that my fees were going to be paid. So I went back to Brother Louis, and he wrote it up, that waived Herman Brown's fee. So I was good for that first semester. The second semester came up, I had to go through the same thing again. I had to go to Brother Louis again, which I was afraid to do it. You know, I said, I hope he does it, you know, no problem. He did it again, and the registrar acknowledged it. So Brother James, he said to me, he said, Herman, he said, we wanted to give you something back because of what sacrifice you made, that what you did and what the other guys did, it changed the direction of this campus. And St. Mary's wanted to pay you back. So I emerged on the campus as a hero in their eyes, from being despised and a villain, that when I was leaving, I was put up to the level of helping the campus change its direction with the other four guys. So because of that, I owe to St. Mary's that final year here of having another scholarship to become the person I became as a professional. I had a teaching credential. I could apply for a teaching job anywhere in California. And St. Mary's had one of the greatest teaching programs in the state. And back then, if you completed their requirements, you received a credential for life, not where you have to go back and renew it. I had a lifetime teaching credential. So with that, and that was in 75 when I completed those courses, I returned back home knowing now I can go and apply for a teaching position. And I didn't do it right away, y'all. I didn't go after it until January of 76. In 75, that summer, I went and played basketball in the Philippines for a month, made a little extra money over there, and came back and chilled out from September until January, just getting the college experience, you know, out of the way and just not doing anything. But in January, I went down to Oakland Unified School District and applied for a substitute position, because then you had to be a substitute before you could get hired as a full-time teacher. The very first day I went down there to apply for it, the lady who was there, she took all of my paperwork that I had filled out, and she says, why do you think we should hire you? You know, and I said, well, because I graduated from Oakland Unified Schools. I'm a graduate of McClymonds High School. And when we were in high school, we were told, go to college, get a degree, and come back and help. And I said, I've done that. Now I'm back. And she just smiled from ear to ear and says, do you have a car? And I said, yeah. And she says, can you do a math class? I knew enough math to teach an algebra class. And I said, yeah. She says, okay, there's a position, this was in the afternoon, that they need a sub up at Skyline High School for an algebra class. Can you get up there lickety-split? And I said, yes. So she signed me in, and I fingerprinted, and everything was done real fast, that I was able to go and get in front of kids, because you have to be not some criminal, felon or anything. And they did that, real fast, background check on me. And I drove up there, and I remember that afternoon was my first day in the classroom, hired by OUSD. And that year went by, and in the beginning, 1976, in September, I was hired as a long-term sub, which I didn't have to go to different schools every day. And I had an art degree. Unfortunately, there was an art teacher at Westlake Junior High School who had been robbed and shot in the face. She had her jaw almost blown off, and she needed a sub. She wasn't coming back. And the lady who was in charge of sending you out, I had become friends with her through my brother knowing one of her friends. And we had gone out, had drinks a couple of times, and went dancing. She was probably in her late 60s or 70s, a real little short white lady who was just so cool. And she really could dance, so. But I can't think of her name now, but she called me up that morning and said, there's a long-term art job at Westlake. You want it? I said, of course. That way I wouldn't have to get up and go somewhere. So I went to Westlake Junior High in September of 1976. That was the bicentennial year in the country. And you could only work as a long-term sub up to a certain degree of time, then they would have to let you go. Because if you went a day over that, the district was forced legally to hire you. And there was a freeze on hiring teachers at that time. But the principal at the school loved me so much, and one of the big-time assistant superintendents was the vice principal at the junior high school I attended. They overrode that rule, and I got hired, retroactive in 1976. And I taught in Oakland Unified School District from that day on for 36 years before I retired from Oakland and started teaching for 11 years at KIPP Charter School. But if not for St. Mary's College, at the end of my life here, honoring me and acknowledging me for what I did, and they told me personally that you are one of the reasons this school changed its philosophy on dealing with ethnic students and instructors on the campus. So that was a wonderful gift from St. Mary's to me, because without that, I would not have been the teacher that I became and the person I am sitting across from you to this date. And all of my experiences that I shared with you of coming to St. Mary's, they played off extensively in me going back into the community with an understanding of the African culture from the students there. And I'm glad you asked that to bring this back, because I would have missed this one. In my senior year, true senior year, I took a class in the evening. That was the very first year in the evening that I took a class, and it was on Eastern philosophy. The instructor of the class was a guy whose name was Haas. Can't remember his first name. It was Haas. He was the poet laureate in the country that year. And I took his class and studied Eastern philosophy. So I got enlightened to Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, which opened me up to Asian history and Asian cultures. So I make mention to that on the point that I had a lot of Asian students when I went to Westlake. Westlake was like 40% Asian. And at that time, maybe 30% Latinos, and the rest black and others. because of St. Mary's, I walked into an ethnic diverse junior high school, and I knew about Asian culture. I bonded with so many Asian students from that experience. As a matter of fact, 3 of my students, they're all in their 50s now. They still call me, take me out to dinner. One of them, their family owned a big restaurant in downtown Oakland, but it's closed down now, Vietnamese restaurant. And I'm still in touch with them. They still call me Mr. Brown. And because of my association with the Latino friends I had here, the Chicanos and the other Latin groups, I got in with the Latin community at Westlake also. I could speak Spanish because of my familiarities with the Spanish-speaking students here that we bonded with. I was accepted into their community, the Asian community, and the Latino community, and of course being black with the black community. St. Mary's gave me everything that I needed to nurture me in that first job that I had with a contract. And I became a very beloved teacher there for all those many years. So with that course with Mr. Hass, with Asian culture, that just sent me over to the top with the Asian students. And I could talk with the Asian instructors there about Chinese philosophers like Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu, and they were all surprised that I knew about them. And that St. Mary's experience just developed me into that full-rounded person. But there's one thing I want to just throw back in, and I'm glad because telling so many stories, you forget some. This is the last thing I think I'll say, and we can close it and be on time. The last year at St. Mary's, and this has a lot to do with Mushir, there's a question coming up later about our friendship. The last year, when I was my true senior year, not going the next year to graduate after the suspension, Mushir and I we were roommates. And we were on the 4th floor, the very top of De La Salle. And we had a window up there, you could open it up, and there was a little balcony out there. But Mushir and I became very closely bonded with each other in that year. We turned the black community that was up at the school at that time into a whole nother level of their existence. And I'll share that with you, how that was done. Not that we planned it, but Mushir and I had developed so much as young men that were culturally, ethnically, deeply grooved. And we were no longer guys from being teenagers, but young men. And we were into jazz. And we played jazz religiously. We listened to the greats like Charlie Parker, Lester Young, I can go on, and we were playing jazz all the time in the room. Of course, I was an artist. I would paint in the room. I had my canvas up there. And Mushir and I were both poets. We would write poetry. And we were taking a class and one of the ethnic studies classes was in poetry. And we were major contributors in that class. So it was a cultural center that was up in our room. And there was 2 Asian guys used to come up, and 2 of the African guys would come up. You know, a small group there, but they would come up, and one of the Latino guys who went to high school with Mushir, the last part of that year, he moved in with us. Something happened where he had an apartment in Lafayette that didn't go through, he couldn't keep it up or whatever, but he wanted to stay on campus to finish his year up. So he stayed with us. So the 3 of us were in that room together. And I learned a lot of Spanish from him. You know, being there. I knew Spanish because I studied Spanish in high school. I could write it and read it, but I couldn't speak it because I never got to practice. But with Phil Fargus, I got a chance to practice saying certain phrases with him that carried on over when I got to Westlake. And he was a good cook. Mushir and I were cooks. We had a hot plate back then, that's what they called it. And he was cooking a lot of ethnic dishes. Now, one of the guys from Africa, from Sierra Leone, had a cousin, female, that came up to visit him and stayed for about 5 or 6 weeks. And while she was there, she got a crush on me. And her and I were seeing each other. You know, I took her into Oakland. I took her to meet my parents and, you know, rode her around, get her off the campus. And we were kind of developing into being sweethearts. But she was going to go back to Sierra Leone in June. But we hung out together. And she would come up and cook cultural dishes from Sierra Leone. So we had Latin dishes, African cultural dishes, and boy, she cooked a lot with hot peppers. And I learned how to eat and burn my tongue out, but I got used to it. And she was up there. And gradually other students found out that Mushir and I had this kind of like unacknowledged Black Cultural Center up on the 4th floor. And people would come and drop in and sit up and listen to jazz. They were getting exposed to jazz. They were getting exposed to our poetry and short essays. And they were seeing my artwork that I was doing in the classroom. It was like really the first cultural center on the campus was Mushir and my room on that 4th floor. And one of the younger, I call her sister, you know, black student, one of the females, she had met with some other graduates, black alumni graduates, and she came over to see me and Mushir, came over and talked. We had a little gathering together. And she said to us, she said, you guys were really out there. Said that there was nobody on that campus like you two. And everybody learned so much from you. But Mushir and I evolved into that. Mushir and one of the other guy who was with me at the walkout, they had a radio station. St. Mary's had a broadcasting station there called KCSM or it's KCSM, I think that was it. Mushir would tell you. They were DJs, but they had a time slot. The worst one you could have was that from midnight to 1 in the morning. But they were playing jazz on that. And I would go down there and sit in there with them, and they were broadcasting. And just so happened, somebody was driving by and heard the broadcast and came up to the school the next day to find Mushir and came up to our room and started talking jazz with us. And you know, we became friends with that. So those little extra parts in there were like winding down and winding out of St. Mary's. So I think that's about it.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yay!
This was great.
Thank you. Well, perfect timing.
Yeah, 4:07. Perfect.
Cool.
I will
you
get
think-
the
yeah.
guide.
Thank you.
And thank
Thank
you,
you so much.
One more.
thank you all too for doing this and getting into it and whatever. And I know this will come up later,
It
but
was like flashing towards the end. I don't know what that means, but
That means it's about to die.
it was like the end part, so we got
I
that.
think yeah, it's just the battery.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
that bit it, but yeah, other than that, I mean,
okay. Well, again, nice.